Hello everyone, this is Trek and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about Magic the Gathering and actually teach you how to play. So let's go ahead and get started. Magic the Gathering is a collectible trading card game played both competitively and casually by millions of players worldwide. Matured as a game over more than 20 years, it has over 12,000 unique cards and there are still more being designed and released. In the world of Magic the Gathering, there are these figures called planeswalkers who are godlike wizards capable of magically summoning armies across worlds, raising nations in hellfire, and traveling freely across the multiverse. They are dramatic figures in the stories the world has Magic the Gathering has to offer, and their presence always preempts times of great change. As players in the game, we take on the role of one of these planeswalkers, battling against one or more other planeswalkers for power. Each player has a deck representing their repertoire of magical resources and spells, and during the game they'll draw a hand of cards from their deck representing what's available for immediate use. In addition, each has a section of the board of the area that you're playing, which is representing your battlefield, across a larger battlefield between you and other players. Your goal is to reduce your opponent's life total to 0 by dealing damage either through spells or by attacking with your armies. When the player's life total reaches 0, they are eliminated from the game. To begin the game, you must first pick a format. Formats are variants on game rules designed to appeal to particular styles of players. For your first game, it is recommended to play the standard format, and we'll stick to that. But I'll talk about other formats in later videos. Then you'll need a deck, which is another complicated subject in and of itself. I could go on for weeks and dozens of videos talking about deck construction. But for now, if you don't have a pre-constructed deck, go ahead and take 20 cards marked with basic land, which I'll show you right here. Basic land, and make sure you pick ones that all have the same name, and shuffle 40 and other cards that have matching borders. So here we have blue, or you could go with, let's go with white, or green, or there's lots of colors, so I'm just showing you the different borders and what they might look to match. You might also be able to match them up by matching this symbol with what symbols appear in the top right. Then, once you have a deck, each player shuffles up, draws 7 cards, and sets their life total to 20. To keep track of your life total, most players use a dice that's 20-sided, but paper and pen is perfectly fine if you prefer. The players then roll off with the dice to decide who goes first. And whoever rolls highest gets to go first. Players then take turns, each consisting of 5 different phases. And after going through all 5 phases, it becomes the next person on the left's turn. If there are only 2 players, it just switches back and forth. In the first phase, called the beginning phase, you first untap all of your permanents. Permanents are anything that you've played previously and are currently active on the board. For example, I have 3 things here, and everything you have on the board has a tapped and untapped status. These are currently at untapped status. Tap status is 90 degrees to the right. And what this represents is a resource being exhausted. And so at the beginning of each of your beginning phases, you take everything that's 90 degrees and you turn it up. This is called untapping. After that, you go through the upkeep, which means nothing on its own, but many cards will have effects during the upkeep. Like, for example, this guy here, which says, at the beginning of your upkeep, target player draws a card and loses a life. So again, the upkeep doesn't do anything, but a lot of cards care about the upkeep, so keep it in mind. After your upkeep, you draw a card from your deck. Take 1 card from the top of your deck and put it into your hand. And you do not do this on the very first turn of the game. Alright, once you finish the beginning phase, you then move on to what is called the main phase. And it's during this phase that you can play all of your cards. So if, for example, I have a hand that looks something like this, and these are the cards in my hand, I can choose to play these cards. To play a card, I first have to pay its costs. Costs in Magic the Gathering operate off of a virtual resource called mana, of which there are 5 types: white mana, blue mana, black mana, red mana, and green mana, each of which is associated with different philosophies and flavors in the game's design. This right here is the symbol for green mana, this right here is the symbol for black mana, this right here is the symbol for white mana, blue mana, and yeah, that was all of them, right? Yeah. Okay. Cost to play cards are shown at the top right of the card. The colored symbols represent each colored symbol that you see at the top right represents a singular mana which must have a matching color. For you need a single green mana to pay this cost. In addition, there will be a numbered symbol, or usually it will be a numbered symbol, which represents an additional amount of mana, which can be of any type, including green or another color. Just to show you some more examples. This guy, for example, costs a black mana, an additional black mana, and 3 mana, which can be any color. Mana is produced by land cards, which I have sitting out in front of me. Land cards do not have mana costs, as you'll notice. You can simply play them, albeit one at a time. In Magic the Gathering lore, planeswalkers draw their power from lands they've visited and built connections with through their adventures. They pull mana from them, and this is represented in Magic the Gathering the game by tapping your lands, and this produces a singular mana of the appropriate color into what's called your mana pool, which is a fictional place where mana is stored. You can only play 1 land a turn. In my experience as a Magic the Gathering judge, I see many new players get confused by the role of lands in the game, and in particular the hang-ups I see the most relate to the difference between mana and lands. But many players form a conceptual shorthand of cards costing tapped lands instead of mana. This inevitably leads to many struggles going forward while learning the game. Try to keep the ideas separate. Lands are tapped to produce mana, and that mana is used to play spells and cards. The biggest problem with how this sort of comes about is because of errata. You see, over the years, Magic the Gathering re-releases new editions of the exact same card, innovating on the text or the templating to improve on how easy it is to understand. But basic lands, like these, which are all the exact same card, instead of becoming clearer over the years, they became more aesthetically pleasing and shorthand to streamline the game. These are the exact same card, but each has like 10 years of updates in between them. If you notice, the most recent one is this one, which has almost no text, but does have the green mana symbol. This one, from some odd 10 years back, has the green mana symbol and some text, but not really enough to tell really what it does. This one, which is much older, actually has the symbol indicating to tap it, and in exchange you receive 1 green mana in your mana pool. It's important to understand that this is actually what these two are doing, even though they don't actually say that. Moving on, there are quite a few types of cards to play in Magic the Gathering, but only a few are likely to show up in your first handful of games. And I'm going to explain what those are. They are lands, which we've already discussed, sorceries, like for example, artifacts and enchantments, and creatures. As I explained what the types are, don't worry if a card has some text on it you don't understand yet. In fact, for your first few games, I'd recommend playing as though most cards didn't have any special text inside their text block here. Just focus on the basics, which is this power and toughness, this type line, this mana cost here. These numbers down here, this type line, and the mana cost, and for each of them. Type line, cost, and type line, cost. Sorceries are very simple. What you do is you pay their cost, which this requires 2 blue mana. Then you go through the text and act out what it says, and then you put it in a discard pile, which is going to be off to the side. In the game, your discard pile is called your graveyard. Instants are very similar to sorceries. They do the same thing. You read the text, you go through what it says, and you discard it and you put it in your graveyard. The only difference is instants can be played at any time, including during your opponent's turn, or on other phases of the turn besides the main phase. As long as you can provide the mana to pay their cost, you are free to play instants as you will, whereas everything else must be played during the main phase. Artifacts and enchantments are both very similar from a rules perspective. They don't really have anything fancy to them. You just read what they say and do it. Unlike instants and sorceries, however, they have lasting effects on the battlefield, and they stay out and they continue to affect the game. They're very varied, and I can't really give you a general catch-all sort of what to do with this kind of phrase to go with them. I recommend just reading them. Enchantments and artifacts differ only in sort of their philosophical flavor. Enchantments tend to have wide-sweeping, game-altering effects, like, for example, if you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. Whereas artifacts tend to be utilitarian in effect, like, for example, this one right here, which both provides you with mana as well as the function to draw 2 cards. This, by the way, is also the tap symbol. I showed you an older one before. This is a more up-to-date tap symbol. Creature spells, or creature cards, are spells of summoning, conjuring beasts to serve or pulling loyal armies from across the void to do your bidding. Like artifacts and enchantments, you pay the cost and you put them onto the battlefield, and there they sit. Creatures, however, have the power to attack and defend for you. This is done during the next phase, the combat phase. The first thing you do during the combat phase is choose which creatures you're going to attack with. You can only choose untapped creatures that have been on your battlefield for at least a full turn. So if I had just now played this Bloodgift Demon, I could not choose it. But let's say that both of these cards have been out for at least a whole turn, and they are both untapped. They are not in this position, so I can choose both of these to attack. Then I choose which player they are attacking. If I only have one opponent, then I choose that opponent. But if I have multiple, they can attack 2 different opponents. And then I tap them and declare them as attackers. You can think of this as sending your creatures out as an army to invade another player's domain. Then the defending players choose with what creatures to block with. If, for example, this Bloodgift Demon was your opponent's, and I was attacking with an Angel of Serenity, then I could say, I want this Bloodgift Demon to block this incoming Angel of Serenity. I can, as the defending player, I can only choose untapped creatures, and I assign them to the attacking creatures on a 1-to-1 basis. If there was multiple attackers here, I could do 1 on each one. Creatures have 2 numbers at the bottom right, a power, which is the first one, and a toughness, which is the second one. Power is the amount of damage they deal, and toughness is the amount of damage they can take in a single turn before dying and being sent to the graveyard. For each pair of attacking and blocking creatures, each of these deals damage to each other. So in this case, this Angel of Serenity will do 5 damage to this Bloodgift Demon, and this Bloodgift Demon will do 5 damage to this Angel of Serenity. Because this Angel of Serenity did 5 damage to this Bloodgift Demon and it only has 4 toughness, it will die. But because this Bloodgift Demon did 5 damage to this Angel of Serenity and it has 6 toughness, it will survive. And as long as it doesn't take 2 or more damage for the rest of the turn, it'll survive to the next turn. So the Bloodgift Demon would die. Now, unblocked creatures, if we go back to the beginning and say we attack with this Angel of Serenity, and if my opponent doesn't have any creatures or chooses not to block, then it would simply go through and deal 5 damage to my opponent. After combat is a second main phase. Now, this main phase is just like the first. It is intended to provide you with an opportunity to recoup assets or reestablish your defensive position if, for example, combat didn't go as planned. If you lost all your creatures, you might choose to play another creature to help defend yourself during your opponent's turns. And that's all there is for that. The last phase is called the ending phase, and all that happens there is you discard down to 7 cards if you have more than 7 cards in hand. That's it for the basics of Magic the Gathering. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe.